My presentation today speaks to African fermented millet and sorghum-based products, their transition from being ethnic traditional foods to value-added products. So the presentation is going to take quite an interesting journey. So we will look at information available in literature and what we have on the market, as well as our own research into fermented sorghum and millet-based products. So I'll share both views with you. So I am presenting on behalf of a team because my research I don't do just by myself. Like most academics, I do research with a team or a research group. So some of the work that I will be presenting is with my previous and current postgraduate students, as well as my colleagues in the department. But before I discuss the topic itself, just an overview of where I am talking from. I'm speaking from the University of Pretoria. It is in the capital city of South Africa, the administrative capital. There's several capital cities in South Africa. So right at the center of the city, it's quite an old institution. It was established in 1908, just over 100 years old, and we have 9 faculties, 6 campuses, and over 50,000 students on campus as of 2020. I belong to the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences in the Department of Consumer and Food Science. The picture right there down below is our department, which was built in the 1950s. It's quite an old structure as well. So the Department of Consumer and Food Science is a recently merged department. Previously, there were 2 departments, the Consumer Science Department and the Food Science Department, that were brought together into one in 2017. So we offer about 6 undergraduate degree programs and of course, master's and PhD programs as well. We also, like any other academic department, partake in research, which most of our students and postgraduate students are involved in. So our master's and PhD student programs are purely research oriented. So in a nutshell, most of our research centers around well-being. I belong to the section that does research into food chemistry, nutrition, and health. We have another section that focuses on product development, food safety, and sensory science. Sometimes we work together on projects that involves several aspects of the research. So we have a clothing department, which also works with sustainability in textile and clothing industry, as well as the food section that deals with culinary science research in that context. So what we try to do is we interlink most of our projects in a way that they talk to well-being principally. So in summary, that's where I come from, and that's what I thought I should share about the department itself, and then move to the actual subject of this presentation. So today we look into fermented millet and sorghum-based products in Africa, expedition from traditional or ethnic foods into industrial value-added products. In the first section of the presentation, I'll talk to the importance of millet and sorghum grains in Africa particularly, and of course, the role of fermentation, what it is, what it does to food, and why I believe that it is an important technology that must be harnessed, and of course, products derived from fermentation mustn't stay in the archives or with generations that pass, but rather should be improved, and of course, products must be available on the shelves, so generations to come can have access to those products. Beyond that, it's that they are part and parcel of most African people's diets and traditions, and therefore they are an important part of our food systems. So why are we talking about millet and sorghum particularly? Because Africa has evolved in so many ways. We've done better on different levels, but we still deal with quite some old problems. Our population is growing rapidly, which is good in some instances because we mostly have a young population, but in some instances we are still on the same land, farming the same land, doing probably the same things that we've always done, and the food demand is increasing, which in some cases leads to imbalance between supply and demand. It is anticipated that currently we have just about 1.2 billion people living on the continent in the different 54 countries in Africa, and we might double the population in 2050. So we have to figure out how we use the same land appropriately and effectively that the demand for food will be met. So that's number one. Number two is that we still have a double burden or triple burden, if you may, problem with malnutrition in form of undernutrition and overnutrition. So stunting and undernutrition coexisting with obesity. Above and beyond that, we deal with a heavy burden of infectious diseases. So HIV is the high rates of HIV infections and TB, which all of those three contributes to poverty and even worsens the problem of malnutrition itself. We are not left behind in the challenges relating to climate change. So in the last, I think, 3, 4, 5 years, we've experienced severe droughts that interchanges with severe flooding. So that affects food production. All of those three combined together contribute to a lot of food insecurity and nutrition insecurity as well. So we have to look within and find some solutions within our own food systems. And the first step to getting there is actually looking at our own foods that we have depended on for many generations, centuries even. And some of those are grain foods, particularly maize and sorghum. I remember when I was younger, most of us and our people were encouraged to grow maize, which is good. I think maize is corn, yes, which has improved food production and food security. But maize, as good as it is, sometimes does not withstand the climatic conditions in our side of town. So it is therefore important that we look at our own grains, and millet and sorghum are actually considered climate smart crops. They are drought resistant, so which means they grow even in the harshest of the conditions. Beyond that, they only follow maize of the top three grains consumed in Africa, which makes them quite an important staple for most people on the continent. And millet particularly, the 7 top producers of millet in the world, all are African countries: Niger, Nigeria, Mali, Sudan, Ethiopia, Chad, and Burkina Faso. So you can see just how relevant these crops are to the continent. As a scientist then, and a believer in science that brings about change, I believe it is necessary to continue digging deeper into understanding how these particular crops will impact nutrition and food security in the future of Africa. Just to highlight what I already mentioned, you can see that just about next to maize, sorghum and millet as the highest produced grains In the continent, we import a lot of rice and barley and other grains and wheat from other continents. So we have to somehow find a way to use our own grains to make food, because we already have these food products as part of our systems anyway. Beyond the fact that they are drought resistant and environmental friendly or climate friendly crops, they are a big source of energy for a lot of people on the continent, to some extent a source of protein, especially when they are combined with legumes. They give a better balance of amino acids for consumers. They are used as weaning food for most populations on the continent, and therefore contribute to nutrition security and food security. Above and beyond that, sorghum particularly, and millet to a larger extent, is a good source of nutraceuticals and can be used as an ingredient in functional foods and in nutraceuticals. If there are colleagues that are familiar or work with sorghum, they would know that it is a good source of phenolic compounds, particularly good levels of phenolic acids, flavonoids, and of course, popularly known for tannins and prothyanidins particularly. So I have a colleague in the department who has extensively worked with that aspect of sorghum. I would like to share some of our work to highlight what I already stated. Sorghum, particularly as a source of nutrients. This is a study that I did a few years ago, about 10 years ago, where we combined a very unknown legume commonly found in Botswana and Namibia with sorghum, and we're able to get a good balance of protein levels and amino acids. And so I thought I should highlight some of these findings. And if you need some of these papers, I'll gladly share them with you in the end. So why fermentation then? We have highlighted the importance of the grains, but then why not use any other processing technology? Why fermentation? Because, as I mentioned, fermentation forms part and parcel of the fabric of the diet in pretty much all African countries, Northeast, West, Southern Africa. You will find a specific type of fermented product that is going to be there in weddings, in funerals, in every important ceremony in Africa. Beyond that is that in most parts of Africa, we don't have sufficient energy supply in electricity, so we don't have refrigeration systems. So fermentation then provides a preservation benefit in these types of foods, and it helps in detoxification of foods. And I have a personal experience with this. In my country, we consume a lot of cassava. It's tapioca. I don't know how common it is in Jamaica. So we have two varieties. The one that has cyanide, and the other one, it's called bitter cassava, and then the one that doesn't. So the way we treat bitter cassava to remove the cyanide is by fermenting it for about 3 to 4 days, and then make flour out of it and make different kinds of products. So without fermentation, we would not be able to eat our favorite meal. Another benefit is that you will be able to enhance bioavailability and bioaccessibility of some minerals, particularly iron and zinc. And I'll speak to that in the next few slides. And we are able to produce a variety of products using fermentation. Just an overview with fermentation, particularly in this presentation, I'll focus on lactic acid fermentation. When we talk about fermentation, we're looking at biochemical modification of the food matrix, where microorganisms use food constituents as substrates to produce new metabolites, new products. In lactic acid fermentation, we're looking at the primary product there to be your lactic acid, which reduces the pH level of the product and then allows it to stay on the shelves relatively longer than the original product would have stayed on the shelves. You can stop me if you have questions or clarity, or maybe we can have a moment for questions later on. I don't know how you want us to do it.
We can do the questions at the end.
Afterwards, all right, thank you. Just another slide to highlight the relevance of fermentation in Africa. Like I said, this is an African map, all the 54 countries represented. This can only show us just how relevant these products are. Right up in the western side of Africa, in Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, in Ghana, in Benin, to the east in Kenya, in Ethiopia, you can see that these products are everywhere, and I did not capture everything. So we then can see how important these products are. What is sad, however, is that in most countries, these are still considered ethnic products, so they are not really available in the supermarkets. You can only test them during a special moment at home, in the village, and they're still passed on mostly from generation to generation, with a few success stories that I'll share at the end of the presentation. But we do know that these are really important products to a lot of communities on the continent. And we do not ferment cereals only, and I selected cereals because these are staple foods for most people in Africa, but we can ferment a range of products, from legumes to leafy vegetables to fruits to animal products, milk particularly, and fish. So we use fermentation for preservation in every single thing. And I don't think it's unique to Africa. Other parts of the world do use fermentation as well. We did some work a few years ago to look into what fermentation does to the microstructure. Can we use fermentation-derived products to develop other products beyond the original intended use? And we started off looking at the functionality of the fermented millet flour. And in this paper, what we did, we compared the microstructure changes in the grain and the flour and related that to the functionality, particularly the swelling capacity, ability to hold water and oil. Because there is an evolving market, particularly in South Africa, where people are moving towards the gluten-free products. And if we position these particular crops as gluten-free alternative products, then we have to study their functionality in dough, rheology, and other aspects of food production. So in this particular paper, we did observe that indeed there were some changes in the microstructure of the grain itself and the flour. And we saw more uptake of water and more oil absorption capacity, as well as swelling capacity, which is quite interesting. And we tested it in a cookie or biscuit system, and it performed quite well, both from a nutritional and a consumer perspective. So that was some really interesting findings. This was a follow-up study to look at then what happened to the nutrition quality of the food product and the sensory characteristics as well. I only selected the nutrition because I wanted to highlight what I mentioned earlier on the role of fermentation in enhancing nutrition, particularly bioavailability of minerals such as zinc and iron, which form part of the most deficient minerals on the continent. So what we saw then is that we see a significant improvement in iron, particularly by an increase by 50%, which is quite encouraging. This means that when we do ferment food, not only do we have a shelf-stable product, we also have a product with really some significant improvement in nutritional quality. We also saw a slight improvement in protein content. There is a few schools of thoughts relating to how the improvement in, for example, mineral content and bioaccessibility happen. One of those is the interaction between fermenting microorganisms and what we now know as anti-nutritional factors, particularly phytate. Phytate is very predominantly available in these grains and make them not a good source of minerals, because phytate bind to these minerals and make them insoluble, forms complexes with them. So what fermentation does is it allows for production of phytates, the enzyme that then breaks down the matrix and allows for release of these minerals during digestion. So our other studies now ongoing show that actually fermentation improves bioaccessibility of iron and zinc as well as its bioavailability. We've done some cell culture work and we've seen quite encouraging results as well. There is also an element, of course, of the low pH levels and production of organic acids, which have been reported to be enhancers of mineral bioavailability. So we can see that fermentation can actually be used as a tool to improve nutrition. We did similar tests on protein, both the content and bioavailability, so digestibility in this case, and we saw an improvement, a significant improvement in sorghum. If you have worked with sorghum, you know that sorghum behaves slightly different from most other grains, particularly when cooked in hydrothermal treatment. The digestibility of protein reduces. So to see an improvement during fermentation is really an interesting finding. And in this study, there was comparison between spontaneous fermentation and a specific strain, Lactobacillus plantarum, in this particular scenario. And in both cases, we see an improvement in protein digestibility. So how do we go about fermentation? In the African context, most consumers do spontaneous fermentation. What it means is that they allow nature to take its course. They would take a grain, soak it in water, clean it and soak it in water, grains, and then allow them to stay for days. So in that process, microorganisms will grow in the mixture and then ferment the grain using, of course, the grain as source of energy in this scenario. The challenge with that, however, is that you are encouraging all sorts of microbial growth. So you can't control what is growing in there. So you have bacteria, you have yeast, you have fungal growth, you have all opportunistic microorganisms potentially growing into the food, and eventually you might have pathogens there if the food is not handled properly. It is also done very household level, and if work is done extensively to some extent at a village level, at small scale level. So we have no way of controlling what happens during spontaneous fermentation. The other improvement that is being done, it works for milk and it works for some sorghum and millet-based products, is using a technique called backslop. So what backslop does is you take previously fermented product and you use it as a starter culture for the new batch of your fermented product. So both techniques, you don't have control over parameters of fermentation or even the diversity of microorganisms in the system. So there's been a lot of work done into improving that system. And what has been done is what we refer to as controlled fermentation in this instance, like you would do with yogurt. Selected strains are used starter cultures for better fermentation outcome, if you may. And you can control the biodiversity of microorganisms in the system. You can control the fermentation time and temperature as well. The challenge there with consumers is that the two products don't always taste the same, because with a mixture of microorganisms in the spontaneously fermented product, you get a lot of different flavors and aroma compounds, metabolites produced, which is not always the case in the controlled fermentation process. So as researchers, you're trying to see how close can you get to the original product with a controlled system. And most of the work, both on the microbiology side, as well as the biochemistry or chemistry side and sensory side, is done to ensure that there is a balance between the two worlds. This is just an illustration of what typically you would do. I already mentioned in the previous slide. So in a typical spontaneous fermentation, graph A, you would see that millet is just soaked, cleaned, and fermented for days. Then the water is discarded. Then you have your fermented millet that is dried, and then you can mill it and use it for different purposes, depending on which product you want to make. In the controlled scenario, though, still you do have to sort your millet, clean it up, but inoculate it with a known bacterial strain. In this case, if you're talking about lactic acid bacteria, and maintain that for a particular time and temperature. You control the fermentation parameters. You can drain, or you can calculate the amount of water needed for the entire fermentation process to continue, and eventually you end up with your product. So what kind of benefits then will we get once we are able to optimize the process of fermentation and get products that are risk-free? If you think about the possibility of contamination and pathogens through spontaneous fermentation, the first benefit is, of course, you reduce the risk. You create an opportunity for consumers to have commercialized product. You take the product from a household product that is consumed when there's a special function, or there's a famine, or there's an unusual situation, to a product that you can find on the shelves anytime, any day you want it. And I mentioned this when I spoke about the growth in population in Africa. We have a growing trend of urbanization because our population is generally younger. There's more people seeking opportunities in cities and in towns. They don't have time to ferment for days anymore. So creating these products allow them to have a bit of home with them wherever they are. Plus, these products are healthy and nutritional. So we will have had the benefit of both. We will have increased the shelf life of the product, and of course, the economic value of the product, as well as creating new markets. If we think about fermented products as a source of probiotics, then we can create an additional market for people who are interested in that particular product, or a gluten-free product, for example. We can create that particular market. So we improve the economy and the livelihood of the people, and we also improve, particularly for women who are involved in these particular products, and we keep knowledge that otherwise would have been lost if nothing is done about it. So we have done some work in our labs to look into the products that aren't already on the market and try to do some optimization. And this is a paper that we published. We used a mathematical model, response surface methodology model, to establish a processing fermentation parameters for a product called Ting. It's very popular in South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and in Lesotho. So it's known in those countries, but you rarely find it on the shelves in the supermarket. We also compared spontaneously fermented products and products that were fermented with specific strains and a combination of bacterial strains. So we're trying to figure out for this particular product which strain works better, what gives us better results in terms of nutrition, as well as bioactivity and sensory to an extent. We also looked at the flavor aspects of the products, given that fermentation is known to give really a pool of good aromatic and flavor compounds in the system. So we used GCMS-MS to look into some metabolites. So this was a non-targeted methodology, so we didn't know what we were really looking for. It was the first time that anyone had done this, so but we found quite interesting compounds there, and the follow-up, actually the follow-up study is going to try and see if we can link these compounds, metabolites, to specific flavor perceptions in the food products, and whether these changes exist when we use specific strains for fermentation. So there's more work to be done. I thought I should share this as well. So we had, in the process of doing this study, we found something quite interesting. For anyone following news relating to toxicological studies in Africa, you would know in agriculture, the most worrisome problem now is the mycotoxin contamination, which led to a lot of maize or corn lost in Kenya, and people, consumers would not export some of their produce because of mycotoxin contamination. So in some of our studies with a colleague of mine previously at the University of Johannesburg, we did do some studies on legumes and cereals, and found that there was really something to be done on the role of fermentation, particularly on mycotoxin contamination in these food products, in combination, of course, with other measures that are already in place. This is just in one of the review papers that we wrote after most of our work that was published, to explain some of the key mechanisms that we think are involved in the reduction of mycotoxins in these fermented products. So in the next just a few minutes to go, I will share some of the stories that actually I think are giving us courage to keep working on these products. So some of the products that we have now seen on the shelves, and they are almost in everybody's life. Whoever wants to get these products can go to the supermarket, on the streets, anywhere, and find them. And I chose 4 types of food products in different parts of the continent, so I can illustrate what could be, what is possible if we keep digging deeper into the knowledge of how these food systems work. I'll start close to home. This is a product that I was given when I was younger. It's made from either sorghum or maize, or combination of 2. It's actually a combined process product. You combine malting, which is germination of the seed, with fermentation. And so in the country where I was born, and in my country where I come from Rwanda. I didn't mention that in the beginning. We have these products on the shelves as carbonated products and in different packages. So you can put it in your lunch bag, have it in a wedding, or even in a meeting. And they are almost everywhere. And these at some point were just traditional foods that people made for special occasions. But to see them on the shelves and consumed all over is a good indication that it is actually possible to take a product from an unknown one to actually popularly recognized. The good thing is these are already known. They are not really new. They are already known within the circles of communities, but they've never been explored as value-added products. This is a Southern African product. It's very popular here in South Africa. It's available in so many flavors. I think we have even one multinational company that makes this product, and some local companies. It's available in instant, as an instant product where you just add water and enjoy yourself, to a wide range of flavors available on the market. I have students bring them in my class when we are learning, and it is quite a good feeling to know that this was once an unknown product. But and the advantage of working on these products is when the company has problems that are production related, or there's unusual growth, or whatever problem they have, they can always consult us, and we can find solutions together. So in that way, we are involved in a community project, if you may. Porridges and complementary foods used for weaning. Legumes and cereals are part and parcel of the weaning complementary foods on the continent, and now they are available. These are used examples of West African products, Nigerian, Ghanaian products from Ghana and Nigeria, but they are available in other parts of the continent as well. And lastly, your flatbreads, injera, an Ethiopian product. This is every household in Ethiopia consumes this, and it's available on the market. It was once a traditional ethnic product, but now it's part of the mainstream market. Everyone consumes it. It has nutrition composition database available. Everything as we know it in the normal mainstream process, it is there. So if it is possible for injera, why is it not possible for another product in a different country? So we are hopeful. And finally, the last one is kisra, which is a Sudanese flatbread. You can, even beyond the African continent, you can have these kits that you can use to make your own kisra at home. And the richness and the knowledge that is behind these products is amazing. So we do have a reason to continue working on these. So a big thanks to the team of my previous students and my colleagues who continue to work with me on this interesting journey. And I can't wait to see more products on the shelves. And I believe the more we have the more value-added products we have, the less malnutrition we will have, the less sickness we will have. So thank you very much for the invitation. And thank you very much. I think we'll have a moment for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And, you know, at the end where you saw the different products. And of course, you know, everything starts with a dream and a hope that, you know, what has gone before, that in fact, you know, you would have similar opportunities and similar experiences with your own products. Are there any questions from anybody in the chat or in the audience this morning? Anyone has any specific questions that they'd want to field?
Yes, I would like to offer a comment and maybe ask 2 questions if I can.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for your presentation. One of the comments I wanted to make is that I'm originally from British Guiana, and when you mentioned about the bitter cassava, it turns out that we use a product that it ends up looking like molasses. And from my knowledge, it was discovered by the native Indians. And, you know, they boil the liquid, which drives off the cyanide. But what is fascinating about it is that you use it to cook meats. We call it pepper pot, and it would not spoil. So pepper pot in the native language means never ending. And so as they caught more meat, they would just add this syrup, and all you need to do is heat it up every morning, but it's no need for refrigeration. And so that is one of the uses that we have, and I just wanted to mention that. But the two questions I had was, in terms of the controlled fermentation, is there a sort of a standard operating procedure that you guys can give the locals in the countries to say, well, this is how you do the controlled fermentation to prevent some of the pathogenic products? And then the other question was, is there any cultural resistance to using some of these products as an alternative to the imported products? And I'm thinking of, for example, I know in places like Asia where the locals still prefer white rice versus brown rice, even though the nutritional value is greater with the brown rice. So I was just wondering, from those two perspectives, if you could comment on those two questions.
Thank you very much for the comment, and I fascinated by the other use of bitter cassava, actually. The question regarding the controlled fermentation element. So what we do is, we, together with the microbiology experts on the team, we would isolate the bacteria of interest and then create a starter culture. And it's the starter culture that we try out in the lab at specific temperature and time combination, and do, of course, quality checks to ensure that there are not other problems that are associated with the process. And once we have then gotten that right, we have something like a focus group, where we have these small-scale farmers or people involved in the production of the product at small-scale level. We train them, and of course, we train them how to use the tools that we've developed. The other side, which is why it's working a lot in South Africa, is that private companies, then the product is patented when they support the research, and of course they own the new developed technology, and then they go on to start the company. And the most developed and progressed products went through the latter route. But our belief is that we need to do more on getting the original owners of the knowledge to benefit from it. That's the plan. In the second question, is it not really a resistance per se, but lack of availability of these products on the shelves at all? Because when you talk to an African child, a teenager who has visited a grandma in the village and consumed this product, they are proud in most cases of being affiliated with this particular product. But they can't be having quotes in their classrooms. It doesn't work. So there's a mismatch between the availability of the product and, of course, and there's always going to be an element of the outside is the better. But I always tell them, well, we've embraced eating sushi. It's the most expensive meal on the menu, but it was once something that belonged to a specific culture. Why don't we promote our own? And there's a lot of discussions around this, and I think it will take us time, but we'll get there. I'm very optimistic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for those questions, Patrick. Are there any other questions of any sort? So the millet and the sorghum, are they products that end up in porridges? How exactly are they actually applied and used?
So millet and sorghum are cereal grains, like your corn. In Africa, they are made into flour, which is used to make soft porridges and thick porridges, and they're used together with other. For example, there's a mixture of cornmeal, mealie meal, which is corn flour with with sorghum or porridges for breakfast. There is even extruded products now coming onto the market. So they are already part and parcel of the food system. It's the additional processing techniques that aren't embraced yet.
They can be used in the pancakes that you had described
Yes,
for other
yes.
products as well.
But
Okay.
there are some dough rheology challenges because they, unlike wheat, they don't have gluten. So we were quite fascinated by the fermented version because it had some improved water binding capacity, for example, which made it easy for us to make a cookie or a biscuit. But normally they are very brittle. They break quite easily because there isn't that network formed.
Okay, okay.
All right.
Very well, very well. Well, it is now almost noon, so if there are no further questions, it just leaves me to really, really thank you, Professor
Thank you very much.
Tessie, for being with us. And yes, we hope, well, just to note, there is some alignment between Prof and Dr. Ian Thompson, who is
Yes.
doing, who is in
We have a project that we're working on together. So hopefully I'll make it to Jamaica someday.
Certainly, we'd love to have you. Fortunately,
Thank
I've had the privilege of being in South Africa for a short time, and it was really quite a fabulous experience. You know, first time in the motherland.
Welcome. Oh, welcome. We will be happy to have you visit.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that leads us to thank you all for coming, and we will see each other online again next week. All right, thank you so much for joining us from South Africa. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.